It is 7:02, and we are going to call the meeting to order, and I will have David lead us in the pledge, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, David. All right. We will start with any comments from the public on items not on the agenda or acknowledgements from the board. I think we're good to move on to acknowledgements from the board.
I want to, something that we've discussed intermittently over the last couple of years, our music program. Is it thriving, is it not? And another thing we've discussed is meshing with the programs of the Junction and the high school. And so I was at the jazz, what was it? The Jazz Festival, I guess they called it, which was our submarine band, the Junction's jazz band, whatever they call it, plus a high school jazz band, plus another. I'm not quite sure what the last group was.
The jazz orchestra and their jazz.
And my overall impression was our music program's kicking butt right now. You put that in the and it was just really neat also to see the collaboration between the school. So I think that's just an example of a really neat success that we're having, particularly since it's something that two subjects that we have talked about. It was neat to see that. And there was one really awesome trombone solo by this kid with red hair and hat. Oh, was that Ryan? Was that Preston?
I think so too. Yeah, you know.
That's awesome.
No, he was great. Brian, my son, 10 years old, plays the trombone. He thinks that Zachary's just the greatest thing in the world. So.
Oh, thank you.
That's great. Anyone else? I'd like to thank the PTO. They certainly thank our teachers and staff for all they do, and that was acknowledged formally last week, largely through the efforts of the PTO. They do amazing things. I think people feel very appreciated and loved and cared for throughout the week. And on behalf of our board, we acknowledged all three buildings and the central administration and the bus drivers with variations on sort of fruit and chocolate and flowering plants, just as a token of our appreciation for their work. And in talking with Khaki McGarry to try and not duplicate their good efforts and find something that would be meaningful and add value for teachers and staff for the week, I just asked that she and we think to be part of that initial planning for next year, because they begin that so much earlier and probably very likely right at the time we're budgeting. So I deferred to her to put us on their list of folks that they contact right up front with that planning so that we could have a day that's, we'll do that day of appreciation, whether it's a coffee on the first day or some of the work that they do so that we can make sure that it's a very deliberate thing to be part of that planning a little earlier and then be able to execute maybe a little bit more effectively or with a little more time to plan ahead. So, but I can't thank, of course, our staff and teachers enough, and the work of the PTO continues to be such an amazing asset in our district as well. So, thank you. All right. Moving on to the consent agenda, if we are good to do that. What we have on there are the minutes, the general fund and financial reports, and warrants. But can I have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
A second?
Second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. We are moving right along here, folks. I want to, I guess I should first say and just acknowledge and appreciate you guys being flexible earlier in the week. What happened as Mark and I were planning for this meeting, we were looking at this meeting and looking ahead to the next meeting. And we have 2 reports from Mark in this meeting, and then we had 2 of ours in the next meeting, along with the high school kids joining us, and some follow-up on, I think it's ENDS data, in the next meeting. And as we were looking at that and thinking about the time and having the opportunity to have other families here, Mark and I thought if people were agreeable to it, and Dan and I were agreeable, we moved it forward. And I'm going to thank you folks for allowing us to do that. So we moved it up on our work calendar. I am going to apologize because the other thing I was wanting us to do was to ask somebody at the beginning of this meeting to, you know what, I may ask anyway. Can I ask if anybody would be willing, I was thinking maybe Rachel or David, since they're more experienced hats, to be thinking in the back of your head about the evaluation part of the meeting at the end, so that we might spend a couple minutes on reflections on the process. We had talked at the last meeting about seeing if we wanted to set up a rotating schedule of somebody being in charge of that at every meeting. And I meant to bring the tools that I had picked up when we were at our last training, Mark, and I honest to God totally forgot about it, so I apologize for that. But in the absence of any official tools, would anybody be willing just to sort of lead the last 5 minutes of the meeting and the reflections on how we did on process during the meeting? And if we like the way that feels, then we can put it on our, make sure this summer that we pull out some tools and say, yeah, we like this idea of a rotating sort of meeting evaluator person, and here's a few tools, use whichever ones you want. So if we like.
So what exactly, I guess I just want clarification on what the thought is to evaluate. Like, is it,
like, we have questions at the end of our thing. Did we
how
keep
is it
to the
different
meeting?
than like code of conduct, or is this supposed to be part of what goes into the code of conduct?
Well, I think we would use it as our evidence when we get to that part of monitoring each year. But we may have predated you, Rachel. We had a little meeting checklist thing, like how did we do at the end of each meeting, and it would be, we'd sometimes check it off and hand it to Brendan, and then we didn't do it consistently enough that that data was being mined in any way because we weren't providing that feedback in the moment, and we weren't often going back and doing it at home, frankly, and getting it to Brendan. So we don't have that type of data for any of our monitoring reports. The process that a board that is operating policy governance, whom we had been in a meeting with, used was one person who is having that as part of their job for the night to reflect at the end of the meeting. In a quick sort of summary, we spent a lot more time on this than we should have, or we found ourselves getting stuck in the weeds on this. Just a 5-minute, like, how did this go? And we even say, did the meeting follow its code of conduct during the meeting? Does the board work calendar need to be modified? Future agenda item. So I think just that quick reflection, did anybody dominate? That in the moment, from my set of eyes, vantage point, this is how this meeting went. And maybe we can ask our elder statesman if he wants to do it even. And
just a thought, this meeting, just kind of looking at the agenda, isn't as super exciting as far as wild input, like input from the public and things like that. So this actually might be a
good one.
easy/boring one to do, because we don't have anything really unusual going on. I don't think we have things of too much controversy.
Yeah.
So it might be a nice, what I would suggest maybe is, at the end today, since we don't have the tools, you're thinking of, if we all just kind of think about what do we want to evaluate? If we all kind of think about this in this meeting and say, what do we want to evaluate? Then when you bring the tools in, we can say, well, here's what we said we want to evaluate. Here's the tool. Let's make sure the tools work.
We could do that.
for
Does
what
that
we
work?
want.
So I think we put that on our agenda as a placeholder every meeting, and we tend to get to the end of the meeting and not do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if that feels, we can certainly do it that way and not have any one person have to be responsible for it for this meeting, because we don't have sort of that guide the evaluation. I like that idea, Dan. If that works for everybody, let's just make sure as we get to the end of the meeting that we do give ourselves that 5 minutes to take a look at our process. Because while it's not a super wildly controversial meeting with lots of people here, it is an occasion where we're looking at 4 monitoring reports.
Yeah.
And so that also has opportunity to look at our own process and how we, review monitoring reports. And so, all right. So thank you all for being flexible and allowing us to move up those 2 monitoring reports that were not due until June, and thank you, Dan, for being willing to do it. And we will, on the bright side, not have any more monitoring reports for the rest of the year, so nobody will be roped into anything for the rest of the year. So thank you very much, and with that, Mark, I'm going to pass it to you, because your 2 are meatier and bigger, and I want to make sure we have ample time for that, so thank you.
Oh, man, kind of tough. Boring and uninteresting.
I was looking at mine.
I was effervescent. I mean, I was ready to go. I'm kind of slowly right now.
Sorry.
That's it.
I was thinking mine.
Kimberly, I think it's up on the top nav bar, 2.1. Yep.
2.1.
So, Cashel, welcome your first formal meeting.
Yes.
And what I've done in the past, and it seems to work for the board, is rather than just verbatim read through the policy, is just highlight, which I do in red font, changes to the last year's policy. So this is an annual monitoring report, and it's 2.1, treatment of students, parents/guardians. Just as an aside, I mentioned to Kim a week or so ago that maybe when we were visiting with you, Cashel, to maybe think about adding to this or amending this policy to include community, because it is, community is a really important stakeholder group, and they're sort of absent from this policy. So I know that other boards that practice with this governance style do have, in some fashion, community attached. So something to consider. Obviously, the evidence would look different, but so
Can
this.
I ask just quickly, Mark,
Yeah.
that in mentioning that, do you know if those that do it include it all in 2.1, or do they make it a separate monitoring?
I think it's all
and policy?
inclusive.
It's inclusive.
Probably heavier on the side of parent guardian, but that's something we could research together and see.
Yep.
So you're altering the policy title to be treatment of students, parents, guardians, and community.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
And there might be some other it might be some other things that live underneath that,
Yeah.
because they just wouldn't be germane to the non-parent community, but
Right.
but there's something to think about. So this policy, as you know, is really to make sure that I shall not allow conditions, procedures, or decisions that are untimely, unclear, undignified, and unnecessarily intrusive. And Kimberly, I'm sure you can handle the steering wheel fine. If we go to the bottom of this page number 1, the first section has to do with making sure that I'm gathering information related to gathering the appropriate information based on district, state, and federal guidelines. And I've added a couple of bullets here that were new this year, in addition to what we've done in the years past. Because of our AYP status, that I'm providing information to, if you recall, we had to put aside 20% of Title I dollars to offer supplemental services vis-a-vis tutoring for children whose moms and dads are financially insecure. So we had to be really clear in our correspondence to families who were in that position on what their rights are under the law and how to access those supplemental services. So that was another piece of information that we thought a lot about and vetted through the Agency of Ed just to make sure it made sense, because sometimes it's just clear as mud. And as it turns out, interestingly enough, it continues to be kind of confusing for the at the receiving end, because it's just so much, there's bureaucracy there that gets in the way.
Because the language that's required in that letter is not user-friendly.
It's not
and
negotiable.
you have to.
Yeah. You can put some sort of a homey spin to it, but it is what it is. Yeah. So that's a new letter that went out.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I was asked by 2 80-year-olds of an adjacent school district, setting the stage for the way that it is factual, how do you determine who is eligible for free and reduced lunch?
The eligibility comes from income guidelines, and it's typically parents who are eligible for third-party insurance, like Medicaid insurance, is usually the biggest indicator. But it's eligibility.
The parents or guardians provide the information?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have another source to get it then?
No, they have to provide it.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. I didn't know the answer to
Yeah,
that.
so we're very sensitive to, it's generated through NutriKids, and Bonnie does a really nice job in not being pushy, and we've got forms that are friendly, and but as kids get older, they're less likely to self-identify, because it brings a stigma. But we don't have as big of a problem with that here. because of the age of the kid. The second piece of evidence, just to call your attention to, is we work pretty closely with a couple members of the board of the PTO to provide them with as much information as was appropriate, so they could use their directory in a more useful way in terms of getting to parents, getting access to parents in terms of news that's happening around the district. So that was another thing that we did last year more of than in years past. The second section, you guys with me on page 2?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kimberly, yeah. Is to make sure that we're maintaining an adequate level of confidentiality required by law, and that we don't disclose unless there's a reason to do that. And a few new bullets that I added this year. I think I may have told you this in an update to the board, but we invested in an online student registration process, and we tried to make it work for nearly 2 years, and it was ugly. It was just clunky, and it wasn't. The system wasn't compatible with MSS, our student management system. And Kim Gaywar, who used to be in the data management position, really worked tirelessly, and we had a personal relationship with the president of the company just because she dogged him every day and trying to make it work. And it just became really evident that, given the levels of complaints we were registering, not only on the part of parents and guardians, but also our registrars at the building level, that it just wasn't working. So we dumped it the end of last summer, and we have sort of a middle road between totally digital and paper, because we were trying to, if you recall, make it more seamless for parents to have to fill out 3 packages of registration material. So I think it's a good piece of evidence to suggest that when parents give us feedback, we make adjustments based on their needs, and it was time. Parent permissions are checked at the school level before photographs are published in the public domain. So because we're using blogs more often and the Essex Reporter with pictures of kids, we make sure we've gotten a really clear yes or no in terms of kids' pictures being published publicly in either the Reporter or through the websites. Also, procedures for using surveillance video from school buses. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the new bus procedures that are online, but they're FERPA protected. So we've got, I met with the team last week, and we won't be releasing any of the information should we need to review it on video in terms of bus behavior.
Define in a few words FERPA protected. What does that entail?
It's a federal law, Family Education Rights Privacy Act. So basically, it's a fancy way of saying that we can't disclose student records to anybody but the legal guardian or parent. So if Charlie and Bobby are misbehaving and Charlie's mother wants to see what Bobby was doing to her son, we can't show that information. There'll be strident advocacy to do so, but we'll.
Yes, I can imagine there would be.
Yeah.
That's consistent with what we have to do, though, when you're discussing. Just can't discuss another
Can't discuss,
person's
yeah.
child. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not inconsistent. That's very consistent.
Yep. And I just wanted to make sure the procedures had that language embedded in them. The next policy is subsection 3. Is making sure it has to do with the handicapping accessibility needs that exist in the district with some families and some students. And one of the things that was pretty significant is that Neil McIntosh, who's our district, he was the maintenance technician. His title is now changed to maintenance coordinator. And with that title change came greater responsibility to provide ongoing supervision and to be part of the summative evaluation process for all head custodians starting this spring, this year. So it just brought another level of accountability into the system. And his predecessor, who I never met, had that responsibility, but it wasn't a good match, I'm told. So, Neil's been here for nearly 3 years, so it was time to make that move. He needed to orient to the district and get a sense of the lay of the land. And now that those relationships have been developed, and he has a much greater sense of, what the job looks like, it was time to move that into his bailiwick. So that means that things will be taken care of at the building level when they need to be taken care of, because he's overseeing that.
Do I assume correctly that he's, shall we call, responsible for all school district properties land and buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, we are, but he has oversight of that responsibility.
Yep.
Yeah. And as I've said before, he's just a phenomenal employee, and he's here every weekend. I mean, he works up way above and beyond what he is hired to do, making sure that our buildings and grounds are always safe and running well. I flipped over to page 3, Kimberly, just to continue. I wanted to mention that we are ADA compliant, American Disabilities Act, with our front doors. That came, if you recall, from a piece of persuasive writing that a 5th grader had given me saying, hey, I use a wheelchair, I can't get in. I'm not feeling kind of crummy about that. So we are ADA compliant across the district. We are not at central office, but we are with our three schoolhouses. I also contacted, I have gotten to know the gentleman who's the head of safety security at IBM. He's part of our school safety committee, and he offered up a service to the high school and to middle school administration, and whether or not we wanted to tap into a pro bono resource from the EPA to look at our science labs. And I thought it was a great thing to do because we really haven't done that formally. So these 3 guys took a little junket up to Vermont, funny guys from Boston, and visited with us, and they're going to come back. And I don't have a report for you yet, but some pretty rudimentary, fundamental sorts of things, like making sure our storage is, our shelving unit is fireproof in case something goes bump. More importantly is what are the chemicals we are using, because there's other ways to get at the end in terms of science outcomes without having to use some of the toxic stuff that we've used in the past. So again, another piece of evidence that, trying to make it safe for all kids and families or parents and teachers. The next section 4, is to make sure that I'm being really clear with parents and guardians in terms of what they can expect. And I felt that one piece of evidence, in addition to the Essex Design for Learning, has to do with Common Core. We've been maintaining, I think, a pretty comprehensive website that has a lot of information and resources for families to access should they be interested in Common Core. We ran a couple of sparsely attended, but anyway, principal roundtables last fall. David attended one. We have a nice event planned for next Monday night, the 19th. We're going to do a presentation with up to 7 or 8 people, all on Common Core Next Gen Science Standards. And we've produced documents that have been mailed home. So I thought that was a good piece of evidence. And then transition events are continuing to occur for younger parents going into kindergarten, into 3rd grade, and to 6th grade. Got some ideas, as I suggest later in the report, on how to change those events to be more comprehensive, but nonetheless they're in place. And then reading down the next list of 7 bullets. Those again are just additional evidence that I have listed for the board to hopefully reviewed before tonight to make you aware of things that we've put in place. So I'll pause and just ask if there are any questions about those last additional pieces of evidence.
Is there somebody in the district that, for example, with the Edline and such, that is supposed to regularly update, making sure things are correct? Because that is one of the things that I myself have personally noticed, along with others, that it's not necessarily always up to date, or corrections are made, but they're never, even, for example, when you get an alert now, that information's not on the web if you only catch the little bit of the message.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's somebody in the district that's their job or their role.
Well, there's a district, at the district level, there's a responsibility that's jointly shared between 2 people, and then at the building level, there's a point person for every building to make sure that current events are up there. In terms of the alert now, it's a whole other topical area that we've tried to address more fluently this year. So the audio, it's no longer alert now. A company bought them from someplace, who knows, not Vermont. And so we've had a problem with the Audible, and it's been sketchy a couple different times. So we've been in touch with one call now to try to correct that. But there's also, if there's the most significant issue we've been facing with our bus arrival and delays, and it's just been really, really problematic. And so part of our effectiveness in getting the word out is really contingent on us being told in a timely manner what's happening. And we don't always get that information in a timely way. But I guess what would be really helpful, Rachel, that if any user of the system, if there's outdated information or something that's erroneous, just give us a ring. We don't have a webmaster per se because we just don't have that resource. But we have it's sort of jigsawed out. One person has the home page, one person has different sections of that.
So that was just my
Yeah, I'd
question,
love to
because
get-
because with it that it's almost you can
Yeah.
see where things could easily fall
Yeah,
through,
yeah.
and that becomes
Yeah, I think as a piece of evidence, it's a
Challenging.
much better product than it was a year ago. I think it's easier to work with. It's still Edline, and we've had many discussions, Cashel, about how ineffective this is at times. But,
The joys of using it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But any
Constraint, some of it's constraints and some of it's
some of it's human resource and being able to manage it, and
and some of it's a massive amount of information.
yeah.
Will you be reporting back to us on this school bus business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because quite honestly, I have some serious reservations on what is being proposed, and I speak as a former bus driver.
Okay. So we sent 3 people, one from First Student and 2 administrators, to a 2-day conference in Albany, New York, and they just got back today. So there's a lot of, I think, good things coming our way that's going to help with communication. So
One on the busing topic.
yeah.
I know there were some issues over the middle school with not so much busing actually, but more just parking lot safety. With the way kids were being dropped off, and Mr. Briggs sent out a few reminders to
Don't mow
parents.
down your neighbor. Yeah.
Yeah, those kind of reminders. Was anything further? Did that clear up all the problems, or were there still issues, or where does that stand at this point?
Yeah, I think the way to address it, and I've addressed it with Essex PD as well, and short of putting a monitor out there and telling people to be respectful of your neighbor, pedestrians, I think it's going to crop up from time to time. I think the only way to do it is to have a official from the Department of Agency of Transportation, AOT, come and look at flow patterns. And when school campuses get to this point, that's usually a resource that they can provide us. They're expert, we're not. Cones and barriers, all that sort of stuff is can be used, but really the best way to look at it is to look at flow of traffic. We did change, if you recall. Staff are no longer allowed to park here at Founders. They all park in the main lot to allow that flow better through this parking lot. I was mentioning to Kim, we just have a lot of parents who drop off their kids and pick them up. I mean, it's just, we spend
Do you know how many there are?
$750,000 on a bus contract, and I bet a third of the kids come in by personal vehicle. But
Do you know how many students are being dropped off now?
I don't, David.
school.
I've never really taken a tally. There are days when the line is all the way back to central office.
A number of years back, there was a subcommittee on transportation, parents involved. Eva happened to be one. And they determined at that time that there were approximately 100 students per school being dropped off.
Yeah, I'm
about
guessing a
25%.
third, but it's a good question, and I just haven't pushed the button on AOT coming in, but it does crop up, especially during the winter months when it's cold and parents want to get their kids to school without having to wait for a bus.
And it's interesting, you see, actually, when you mention EMS, I see it more and more at Founders also. Just, I very bad near misses at Founders recently, just with the drop off and the people
That
kind of
little bottleneck,
circumventing,
yeah.
and it's been interesting, and I've started to think that somebody needs to take a look at that and see, just from a safety point. One of them was even a bus trying to pull out around the cars and having
Yeah.
a car pull out and thinking, okay,
it's
this
squirrely out
this
there.
is a problem.
And the elementary school, it's squirrely too. It's
Yeah.
just
At
a
least
lot of
it isn't
vehicles.
slow.
So, David, yes, and it's stated in my report that look forward to a more thorough, rollout of what we're doing around bus timing, and schedules, and that sort of thing,
And I think
and communication with families.
as Mark had mentioned that to me, he also mentioned that they'll be looking probably at routes, and because sometimes that parent is making a choice based on the time of day their child would otherwise be picked up and waiting in the cafeteria. So there may be information that comes out of that type of a review, even internally, of the routes and the timing and
Yeah,
departures and
absolutely, that will
pickups
change.
that might change a little bit practice. And with the notion that lots of parents wait until their students walk in because they're watching them and there isn't a staff outside, there are ways to think about if there's a better way to keep flow going. Do parents feel differently if there is somebody standing outside that they know is receiving their child? So I think it's great to consider what our options are without doing major reconstruction of our drop-off lanes or ditching the entire bus program.
Oh, no,
So-
no,
no,
no.
I know that wasn't
I don't think I'd
considered.
last
Yeah.
long in this position if I brought forward this recommendation. Yeah. But, you know, it
yeah.
is different today. You know, years ago, you know, I'm an old guy, you know, kids would go home, get on the bus, and they all went home and, you know, had cookies and milk and hugged mom, and that was, you know, that was it, play in the backyard. Kids go everywhere today after school. And if you just
Yeah.
sit in the office at the elementary school and you watch those office staff with the phone calls that are happening and the crumpled up notes with egg all over it, you know, I'm going to Bobby. I mean, it's really amazing. Parents trying to make it work for their children, and I'm surprised we don't lose kids. We don't, but it's just amazing.
We have it at Don's.
You know, sometimes they fall asleep in the back of the bus. But, so I feel I'm in compliance in this section. I did note that I will bring back a more formal presentation on our communication with families around buses. And I also want to bring back some information on how I think we do a better job with helping parents transition to the next grade level. I've a little bit bold in one of my statements that I think the 8 to 9 transition, I really want to facilitate a conversation with our colleagues at EHS in terms of what does that look. And I feel that I'm not meeting our exiting parents' needs if I don't have a more direct role in being able to shape what that presentation or those transition activities look like. I've spoken to the building principal, Rob Reardon, about that, and there are a variety of things I think we can improve upon to provide students and parents with a better sense of you know, what they can expect. So look forward to more information coming on that.
One other topic, back to what we were talking about before, kind of back to the computers and Edline and consistent information. How much effort is put into getting a consistent quality product, so to speak, out of each classroom teacher? Because I noticed one, again, having had, how many teachers now? I don't know. 13, 14 teachers between my two kids.
Yeah.
It's amazing the difference
Yeah.
in this one's just so totally plugged in, and you log onto this one and you go, oh, look, there's information from last September. You know,
Yeah.
is there any resource for the teachers who feel like, well, I'm not really that good at doing this,
Yeah.
or something to help them, push them?
There are clearly resources available, and they have been certainly before I got here. And you're right, there's still an issue of how much, you know, some teachers use it to teach, and that's where you really see the differences. When teachers use Edline for the purposes of why it exists, so that it can be a portal into, you know, of the bigger cyber world. But those who just use it as an information sharing, it's you know, it's night and day.
Yeah.
There's been no mandate, you know, that's come from me saying you all will, but it's strongly encouraged at the team level. And I think as we build, you know, more interdependence between teachers on teams, people see more utility in the use of it, because teaching is not an isolated thing anymore. You've got to be with other teachers. So if one teammate is using a website and one is not, you know, we're just looking at, hopefully it's going to just change slowly over time, but it still exists, and I'm aware of that.
Is that?
And I think feedback to teachers, you know, that from parents who are maybe disappointed that they don't have the same level of service that they got the year before, is appropriate for teachers to hear that. You know,
Is that all we can do, or not we the board, but the administration? I'm thinking it may be not a contract issue, but more a practice issue, and if that's a valuable tool in terms of all of our opportunities to communicate with parents, especially as we look at more the ongoing dialogue, and not just once or twice a year connecting. Is that something that could be considered more strongly as not necessarily a mandate, but these are the expectations. You might reach it by your own website, you might do it by blogs, or however, there might be lots of different tools, but the end product is the expectation. Is that part of the conversation, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been a strong, it's every year it comes out, remember, here are the resources, our tech team are available to help you, but there hasn't been it basically is still, the model is, if I think I need help, I'll go ask for it, and if not. So I guess what we probably don't do enough of, Dan, and I'm just making an assumption that I'm not out looking at teachers' websites, quite honestly. And I don't even know how much principals do that, but can I make an expectation of building administration that you should be perusing and visiting people's websites? There should be a basic standard in terms of what a website looks like, and if it's not meeting that basic standard, then that's something that I think I'm very comfortable saying. Especially if it's year-old news.
Yeah, and right now there is no guideline, any kind of written or official guideline of your site should at least have this.
No.
Okay.
No, I think that we know what that it is, but there's nothing in writing.
Okay.
But let me look at what that monitoring looks like of those.
That would seem somewhat similar to the idea that there'd be an expectation of how often, I know it only, grade posting or whatever else, however they log it at the middle school, I know at different times has looked differently to me based on when I've had more than one kid in the building and when I was getting updates on grades from some, routinely and some very, very infrequently. And so that would be a secondary question. And it's sort of that larger question of ongoing communication with parents and students that allow for that dialogue that you talked about, that's not just in a couple times a year. Having there be a standard around how that looks as an outcome, as opposed to telling them.
I'd like to think that the technology is not that complicated, so it isn't so much that as much as it's just one more thing that I have to do before I go home. And when teachers use it as a tool to teach, and for kids to be aware of and have to access, because that's where the good stuff is. It's different than it's just seeing I've got to post up homework notes because that's what I'm supposed to do. If it's at that basic level, it'll never really be seen as anything terribly useful. But time is an issue. I know it is. I know a school down the road from us in Chittenden East. The requirement's going to be that all teachers use a blog on their website next year, and it could be as simple as taking pictures of your reading group and putting it up on the website and just sharing with mom and dad. This is what we do in reading. Or do a little Prezi presentation or a Vimeo, but that's another thing I got to do. I got to take a picture. I got to post it. That's what it gets down to.
And something like grades, though, it seems as though if they're posting it in
that's
writing,
pretty basic.
just only because that creates opportunity for dialogue before it's the end of a trimester, and the student may or may not realize something hadn't been posted.
Not excusable for sure if that's not on there.
I think allows for parents to be checking in with their kids too on. Yes, I did my homework is often an answer and may not be the whole story. So,
And
that was a good question.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. The last section, section 5, is failed to inform students, parents, guardians on this policy and ways for people to be heard. And two pieces of evidence I thought were noteworthy. One is that we have a relationship with Essex Community Justice Program, and we have created a reparative panel that high school students have been trained to help mediate and guide and facilitate kids at the middle level who've broken the rules. And so that process has allowed a lot more rich information and dialogue. We haven't had to use the reparative panel this year, which is a good thing. Because the level of infraction hasn't risen to the need. But having students to students support each other, I think, provides a clearer message and what our expectations are and the consequences should you behave like this in the future. So that was a good step on Kevin Briggs' part, and that's an ongoing, that there'll be a new set of high school students trained every year.
Is that something, Mark, that'll be part of the information that's sent out at the beginning of the year? I was really interested to read that, and I thought that was definitely new.
It did, because it didn't start at the beginning of the year, and Honestly, I don't know how it's been communicated at this point. I know how it's been communicated in the faculty. I don't know how it's been communicated out to parents. You haven't
I
heard
haven't heard
anything?
anything about it
No.
until this, so.
No, I was really interested to hear about it though, because it's a shift, somewhat philosophically, it seems to me, from a punitive escalation of behavior handling, and not everybody would necessarily understand reparative justice. So it seems like a really good turn on
Mhm.
how we
I
can help
think it
kids
is.
bring themselves back to the expectations of being a responsible member of their community, their school community and otherwise.
Yeah.
But it is a little different than just sending out the bullying policy and procedures at the beginning of the school
Right.
year as part of the handbook or however
Yeah.
else we might do it. And it's different for us as a district to do that, so
Mhm.
that'd be
And there has
great
been
to share,
communication
I
about,
think.
we have trained kids, we send them to a conference to be around the world of difference. You know, we've got students who've been working through the student government to be part of this shift, if you will. I mean, Kevin kicked off with having an expert come in and talk about bullying and harassment, so he's bringing in outside resources to build capacity within the student body to have more say in what happens to us when we screw up, basically, is it's about youth empowerment. So I'll mention, and it should come out, I think there's more information now. It's been a work in progress this year, so it's sort of, it's not in its infancy. I mean, there are kids ready to go, but we just haven't,
Yeah.
nothing's happened in that regard. So there should be some information that goes out from the
For
school.
parents
Yeah,
would be,
yeah.
I think parents would be really interested.
So that concludes 2.1. See,
Any-
isn't that
That was
boring?
not
No,
boring.
no, no.
Very exciting.
Are there any other questions?
Are we going to vote on these individually?
I think we will. I do have one other question myself, but I just wanted to see if anybody else had any questions. I was trying to recall, Mark, there was a point last year where you shared data with us. So under 4,
Mm-hmm.
where we list all the mandatory policies, and I'm sure we have some requirements, or a lot of the mandatory policies as they relate to student and family, treatment of student and family.
Mhm.
And we, I think, have a requirement under those to report the number of instances of any of these things. And I feel like I recall last year we did get that information, but I couldn't find it in the monitoring report from last year. I looked. But I feel like we had, like, there were a certain number of bullying instances in each building, and only one of them ended up becoming. Do you guys
I
remember
recall
that?
yeah, I remember that.
Becoming a formal.
Yeah, I think
That
it
wasn't
was
part
in
of
the
this
ends
one.
policy.
It was in an ends
Mhm.
policy. As
And you'll see it
opposed to
again
this.
in the fall, yeah.
Okay.
So I did reference, as you see, that the state mandated policies
Yeah.
that do relate
Yeah.
around information for parents, yeah.
And I don't think it needs to hold up this report, but as we pull these into this as evidence, that would also probably be a good place, if we're reporting out data to the state on these, which I'm sure, at least with bullying and harassment, we are. I don't know what others we might be
Yeah.
or
I
might
just
not
saw,
be.
well, my interpretation is it's to fail to establish a clear understanding of what can be expected. And I don't know if the data necessarily lives in this report. It's really being clear with, here are your rights based on our policies, and by being clear with parents and guardians and students on what that is.
Yeah, it
That-
fits more, I don't know what policy number it is, but on, I don't even know, but I can see.
I think we
There-
want to
there
find
may-
a place for the
yeah,
data,
there's-
'cause,
there's-
wherever it showed up last time.
Yeah, I think it was in the ends, it was in the ends policy.
And it was around, like, one of the ones at
It
the
was
bottom.
it was incident data, yeah, how many
Yeah.
times it's happened,
Okay.
yeah.
Based on the interpretation, and I think the interpretation is right. This is more just saying that we're making the parents aware,
Okay.
correct? And
Yep.
and it's not necessarily what's happening, but we're
Mhm.
making parents aware that
Yeah.
these are the policies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I want to say it may have been under things like problem solving not in the sense of here's a math
Mhm.
problem, but
Yeah.
social problem.
Yeah, and I think we sometimes make assumptions that parents understand the stuff, and I don't think that they
Mhm.
always do. I mean, I think of our parents who don't speak English as a second language, or don't speak English as a first language, excuse me. Do they really understand their rights? Especially West schools in the West are different than they are in the East, and their role as parents are very different. And so how we make it understood by You know, I mean, there's when you start thinking about it,
Mhm.
you know, I think there's some assumptions we make that may not be entirely accurate. Yeah.
That can make sense, yeah. At some point, that becomes data somewhere.
Mm-hmm. It does,
Okay.
no question about it.
No, when we just talk about like confusion for parents, so one of the thoughts that I had just in reading this is like when kids end up becoming on either like an IEP or 504, is there a separate packet of information that they get?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Just
called
because
parent
I-
rights in special education.
'Cause I don't think that's always consistent.
And they get handed out every meeting, and it's by law.
Okay, that may
Yeah.
not always be consistent,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
from my
Well,
understanding.
if
so.
you hear that it's not, then please
Okay.
let me know. Yeah, that's really important. And there's, and like the disclosure statements you get at the bank teller window, you
Yeah.
know, you want, you know, I've already read it. After a while, you don't need to read it, but especially for parents new to the system, it's important that we take our time to go through it with them.
Okay, just because I do know of a situation, not here, but at the high school where
Yeah.
that's becoming an
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
But so I wanted to know what
Yeah.
was the case here.
Well, the other piece of information of evidence is that, and I mentioned the Director of Student Support Services, we do offer family advocacy for families who are tangled up in the process and don't get it or feel like they've been mistreated. And we actually advocate that here's an organization that will provide you a family advocate, so, you know, we sort of get out of it because we've got too much invested in it. And we also have mediation as a tool. You know, if it ever got to the point where parents were so unhappy they wanted to register an administrative complaint with the agency of ed or go to due process, AKA sue the district, you know, we have mediation to address their concerns and see if we can come up with an amicable solution. So, you know, we do everything we can to get to yes without, you know, while meeting their needs but also protecting the district.
Any other questions?
Were there any areas in which you were less than compliance? I don't believe.
Kind of
But
ideas
as
of
you,
how to-
I mean, you list up compliance.
Yeah.
Being in compliance.
Yeah, no, I feel I'm in compliance. Again, I think that we make assumptions around whether or not the communications we put out are having the desire.
Mhm.
So I do think it's time, you know, last year, I wait a year, I'm gonna do another survey with parents and not be so wonkish with my language. You know, I think I've gotta find a way to create questions for mom and dad and guardians based on these policies, so they can answer the questions that I think that I would have for them. Like, do you understand when we send stuff home in the parent student handbook, is that meeting your needs as a parent type of thing? Rather than saying, you know, using this language, which is like really confusing.
Yeah.
But I think that I would follow up next year with that type of survey. I can survey, I don't wanna survey them to death either, and, you know, every other year is the way to do that.
Any other questions for Mark?
Sorry, I gave you that one.
Hearing none, could I have a motion to accept the monitoring report?
I'll move that we accept monitoring report 2.1 as presented.
I'll second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome to, want me to just keep going, Kim?
Yes, 2.1, there is a form if we have not had the chance, but Mark very kindly put that at the end of our monitoring report so that we might evaluate that report. And provide that to you, Mark, probably, is that most helpful?
Yeah, this has never really gotten traction.
Haven't.
But, yeah, I mean, the way we left it was that filling it out tonight and then giving it to the board chair, and Kim and I and the board would figure out a way how to provide me that formative feedback throughout the year. I mean, again, I wrote, thanks for your feedback, and I'm writing it down
Yes,
here, but
it's
that's
very
really where it
seriously.
should go.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we don't lose it. That ends up, you know, on a sticky note somewhere in my book.
Maybe that could be a sort of New Year's
Resolution
so to
this
speak.
summer.
Yeah, that would be very
That
helpful to me.
Yeah.
We actually do it next year
Yeah.
as opposed to just have these pieces of paper.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Point of interest, I don't have any way to print from my computer, so I can't provide a piece of
Right.
paper for you.
Yeah, we gotta, I think, figure out the logistics of the process that gets you the meaningful feedback that, I think we can figure it out.
What if we just make it a standard procedure? If you do a monitoring report, you include the last 5 pages are copies of the feedback form. So when you show up here, you say, here's the monitoring report, and look, I happen to have 5 pieces of paper.
But I still don't have a way to print it.
I know you can't print it, but
we could come with
but
them.
Yeah, we
and
could
then-
have a
like
folder
for
of
instance,
them.
I shouldn't have come with a 3-page monitoring report. I should have come with an 8-page monitoring report. The last 5 of which are feedback
the
forms. That way,
feedback
whoever
form.
does the monitoring report, it's their responsibility. Mark, you do the most of them, so you'd end up coming with an extra 5 pages.
Yeah, and
I can even count on
they
that
are
one, David.
typically included in the board package.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So you
You
include
do
it in
it.
the back
Yeah.
in the back of yours,
Yeah,
but then
so we tend not to, so that, put it to our list.
Put it at the summary tree.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's just a
I know.
logistics thing. We need to just decide on how we want to do that. Because I'm as guilty as anybody. I don't have the 5 forms for 2.1 and 2.2, and I should.
So I didn't, I'm gonna move on. Was there a second and a motion?
There was,
That all
it
happened? That
passed.
happened? Okay.
Yes.
You've been approved.
Well, the next policy is not terribly unlike the treatment of parents, guardians, students, and it really is making sure that I treat with respect all volunteer staff and paid staff in a way that is not unfair, undignified, disorganized, or unclear. In this first section of that, I tweaked the interpretation, if you had a chance to see it. Under my interpretation of making sure that the personnel rules are clear to all staff and to protect them against any wrongful conditions or grossly preferential treatment, there's been a fair amount of, I think that you've heard as board members over the years, this notion that, where's the teacher's voice in the work of the district and what we do. And I believe strongly that teacher empowerment through voice and active participation is tantamount to our success as a district. And so I felt it was important to, in this report, to change the interpretation to include not only is it about how to perform your job, which is sort of the way it's always been, but it also includes the supports that encourage their professional growth and meaningful engagement in program design and evaluation. So that's a new look to the interpretation of this year. And then I go on, which I'll share in a couple minutes, the evidence that I thought was important to share of the things that we have included them in decision making at the program level. So that's the first thing I'll call your attention to, that it goes beyond just making sure they're clear about what their job is, but also that it's clear about how they can get involved with a bigger conversation around systems change. We're off and running, Kimberly.
Yep.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just call attention to page 2. I've added school safety protocols, state mandated policies, and mandatory reporting laws are new to a piece of evidence. There's been, in terms of mandatory reporting, there's been a fair amount of high-profile events in the state where educators have not reported based on the law concerns they might have about a child's safety. And if you recall, from the northeastern part of the state, 2 high-ranking officials, left this last year because of, nearly being prosecuted under criminal law that they hadn't done due diligence. So that really got my attention in terms of making sure that our staff are well aware of what their responsibilities are under mandatory reporting. So that's something they need to hear every year. And we did that we reviewed that with staff this winter once that event happened, but it needs to be part of our normal orientation at the beginning of the year and when new people are hired to make sure that kids' rights are being protected. So in the August of each year, we provide a general orientation and also when folks are hired. That said, I know for a fact that at the support staff level, people come and go a lot more quickly than licensed staff. And so an area that I've worked with the principals in making sure that guidance counselors have a role, because if the principal can't be always the one who does it. So what's the nurse's role, what's the health professional's role, what's the guidance role to make sure that they're getting the orientation they need around some of these procedures that we have at the school level. So I've included things like, in addition, in red, Act 1, mandatory reporting, bullying, harassment, policy, and procedures. Because I thought that needed to be in writing. And you can see there's also the other mandatory policies that are above. I don't go through each and every policy with staff at the beginning of the year, the mandatory policies. When there's an infraction on any of these, it's when they might hear about it. Well, they would hear about it. But it's not something I routinely do at the beginning of the year. Well, use of technology is so it's not a stand up and deliver. It's when we're in the work is when we bring the policy out.
Yes, Mark, is there anything that they must sign? I think as you go to the doctor's office and you look at your FERPA notice and you sign that you read it,
Mhm.
and you do that almost, every visit is offered.
They
to
do it
you.
online at the beginning of the year.
So you
FERPA,
have-
confidentiality, bloodborne pathogen. They go online. Yes, I saw the video once again.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we have a documentation that they've, been trained in these areas that are required, that they should then be able to
Sign
identify
off on.
problems that need to, be reported, and they are signed off in that we have provided that training.
Yep,
Okay,
yep,
that's terrific.
That's
And-
true.
And we do that on the top of, when you come in to volunteer, I think it's at the top when you
Confidentiality is
signing the
there.
confidentiality
Yeah,
piece is
yeah,
there too, so.
yeah. Yeah. I know that our nurses are very vigilant in tracking people down when they haven't signed on, and they some of these fall right within their body of
They're
work.
doing, okay, thank you.
Yeah, welcome. So page 3 again. I listed a number of things that I felt were important for the board to see. And again, I'm not going to review each one separately, but these are a number of things that teachers are involved in. One of the things that is a finite resource that we have is time for teachers to work with each other, and we have. I think we have squeezed this and wrung this as much as we can to find as many minutes in the day as possible to allow teachers to be with each other. So we eliminated bus duty this year, and paraprofessionals are taking that responsibility on. The expectation was that you're giving up 40 minutes, but we're going to reinvest that 40 minutes into team time, because we're trying to spend less time as individual teachers and more time investing in the work of the team. So that's an example of using that time. We gave up, we used to meet staff, have faculty meetings 4 times a month, and principals gave up 3 of those meetings a month to give teachers time as a team. Now the flip side of that is there's a fair amount of, concern at times that they don't always know what's happening at the building level because they're no longer meeting as a faculty. So, we struggle with the issue of time and the time that teachers need to be effective in their planning and evaluation of how things are working in their classroom. This year, when I first got here, it was very district-oriented in terms of our in-service. I wouldn't call it top-down, but we were in the beginning stages of thinking about what's our strategic planning, so there's a lot of stand-up and deliver. Here comes Mark again, with his overheads. But we're at the point now, because I think we are on the right track, that this year was the first year, and probably in a long time, that the majority of time was for teachers to work on teams. So now that we've aligned our curriculum with Common Core and Next Gen Science Standards, teachers now have to develop their units of instruction. So rather than saying do it on a Saturday like you've always done, we're giving them real time during in-service to put those instructional units together. So another example of honoring their role in a democratic way in terms of how to be part of the solution to these problems of
Is that bullet number 4 that you're talking about in that comment?
yeah, yep.
So in other words, the teachers are not individually developing their own curriculum. They're doing it
As a grade level.
Okay.
Yeah. Years ago, it used to be the teacher developed her or his curriculum, and it doesn't work that way anymore. It's grade
Not
based.
necessarily.
Yeah.
We
And I
used
think
to
I've
have very-
reported out before that you could, 3 years ago, you could walk down the hall and everyone was doing something different in science. And that just someone was doing something different in math. So everything is now lined up. So when you go into fourth grade classroom, they're teaching the same content and they're assessing it the same way. And that's where we've been in our work the last few years.
Do you have a sense that that's been work from teachers that they've appreciated or valued that, or do they? Is it the type of thing that just give it to us?
Yeah.
Not having been a teacher, I'm not exactly sure. Are they receiving it as value added for them
The
to
curriculum
be able
writing?
to be engaged and creating?
I believe that they are very happy to be part of it. I think there are some that would like to be more part of it, and because I think there's some decisions that have to be made that are not always, supported. I think the area of curriculum writing is an issue that I don't know how we deal with, but I don't believe our teachers should be the ones who have to take their time to write curriculum. They're not curriculum writers. They're teachers.
That's what I was asking.
Is that what that was?
That
your
was
question?
sort of what I was asking. Like, do they like doing that? Is it hard? Is it one more thing
Yeah.
added to it that they would rather
Well, I do
be
think there's
getting if we could afford to do it, and
Yeah,
they
there are
would
two schools
then
to that.
apply it
Some
in
people-
their style, or I just don't know enough.
I don't want to
about how
write it,
they
but I don't
work.
want to be told what to do either. So I mean, you
That's what I
have
was
that
wondering.
type of
That's
thing.
what I was wondering.
Hillary Kissel, who's our literacy coach, has done yeoman's work around writing the curriculum frameworks because she's extremely, double mastered out of Columbia and Ohio State University. So she's doing a lot of the writing, and there's a fair amount of that's great. And there's some why is she doing it? Well, you can't have it both ways.
Can't please all the people all the time.
But if you go to Westchester County, New York, to choose a district that is a fairly affluent part of our region, they have curriculum writers, people who sit in rooms like this and write curriculum. We don't have that. We don't have that resource.
Right.
But I guess the point of the evidence is to show the board, and again, this is not the entire list of, we do, I think, a pretty good job in enlisting ideas to help us inform some of the bigger decisions that have to be made. I'll present to you in the fall. I've gone around and presented it to all the faculty. I have EMS on Thursday, the teacher growth model that we've been working on all winter. That's going to be really strengthening the teacher evaluation process. Teachers have been we've been sitting together for all winter, putting this design together. So there's a lot of participation, I think, in an appropriate level as well, without completely abdicating our responsibilities to keep us all on the same page. Sorry if I'm taking more time than I should, Kim. And then lastly, if I go to section 3 of the report, making sure they're aware of the protections under this policy. I've listed a couple of pieces of evidence. One is successfully, I don't negotiate, but came to consensus with the non-union support staff around their working conditions. It's a 3-year commitment that we make to those employees, and there's 14 of them. And we did it as a large group. And then we used a threaded conversation online to get feedback. So that's, again, very actively involved with setting conditions of employment for non-union staff. And that, it's a good piece of work. It does take time to get to yes. And then there was a piece, I felt it was important for you to know, we have 250 employees, and not everyone's life is totally, balanced. And so I am very available and meet periodically throughout the year, working with staff who've got some, personal matters that are really affecting their job. And so I do my best as a superintendent to make them aware of what their rights are under the policy, but also try to make the accommodations necessary so they can be effective in their jobs. And that's a role that I value, and one that's, I think, really important. And then finally, under section 4, I felt we had a pretty darn good transition to a new security system in the schools. It was a huge undertaking, and we now, I think, other than a few bumps at the beginning of August, there has not been a problem other than people's cards breaking occasionally. But I really attribute that to being really clear with staff about what their new roles are with this keyless entry and what the responsibility are in terms of keeping the buildings safe.
Any questions for Mark?
It's funny because just as going through this, like the question that I just put is, what is faculty staff's role within policy governance? Like, still in feeling like I'm learning it, how do they fit into the whole model picture? And to me, it just helps me to understand what the expectations are. So, for example, when staff come, faculty or staff come to the meeting, what is their role? Is there a role? Is there not? And I just find that, more clarity in that would be helpful to me.
Okay. So as a piece of evidence in terms of what have I done to help orient them around what the governance structure is?
Well, orient them, but more just orient me again, just to give me an idea, because I keep going back to a model that I remember seeing when it came to policy governance training, and it had, our community. So we were liable to the community, you were liable to us, principals were liable to you, but it didn't really include students, faculty, staff, and just trying to get my mind around where that all
Maybe
works.
this will help, and Cashel saw that overhead last week.
Mm-hmm.
And the community, the owners direct the trustees, you direct the superintendent, I'm your only employee, I direct the resources towards the schoolhouse, and that's the input, and then the outputs come back from the schoolhouse in the form of ends monitoring. And so teachers play a huge role in sharing whether or not the investment we're making in education is having the desired effect. So through monitoring reports, making sure that the grades that we put on the report card or the rubrics we're filling out accurately reflect what kids know and are able to do. That's their role in the governance structure, is to make sure that I've put the system in place where they can report out reliable and valid data. So on the 9th, we're going to have some third graders, I haven't told the board yet, with their teacher who've done some incredible persuasive writing. I thought just blew me away, and kids' writing is just fabulous here. So that teacher's role is to work with her kids to make sure that they're showing the work that they really can do. Celebration of learning is another example of student work, and for the board to see that in prime time is, I think, the role that they play. I don't know if that helps, but
well, just in looking at, and I don't even know exactly, I was just going through this, and it just kept coming back to me. Let me see if I can think about it and what I'm really trying to ask. But that did answer the question I asked. But I think when I wrote this down, I think I had other thoughts in mind, and so let me think if I can remember exactly what I was thinking at the time.
Yeah, I mean, their teachers will be, I think we have 6 or 7 next Monday night. I mean, again, asking them to present on Common Core, who better than, I reference them as expert, they're the experts. So what they think matters to me, and the good, the bad, and everything in between. If it's not working, they need to make sure that I hear that. And so they understand that much. They know that getting things done doesn't start by visiting with Mark to ask him to do something. There's a process, and it's called starting with your team. And I think that they understand the fundamentals of how the governance structure works. You received a petition back in late March. So there's still, I think, maybe some confusion among some in terms of what the board's role is,
and maybe that's more where I was kind of leading, just, and then how do we address that? Because I do feel that everyone has a right to be heard.
Absolutely.
And so
I couldn't agree with you more.
I think one of the questions, and maybe it was part of my question on how do teachers receive that extra time, do they feel that they're happy to be part of the curriculum writing or otherwise, maybe that was part of where my question was coming from, just in general in checking assumptions, like getting that feedback loop on how they're viewing that in terms of a value added for their treatment. And I think in years past you had done a survey of some sort, and I was thinking about that a little bit as I was reading both of these monitoring reports, and it wouldn't be something that's demanded of interpretation in either of these reports, but it is something to consider. If we feel like that would be an important piece of data, then maybe we look at if it asks for another bowl, in that if we feel we need a feedback loop that is mining the assumptions being made on what we're doing as opposed to how is it being received, both for parents in terms of climate or whatever the topic might be, we know what we are doing, or we know how it's being, do we know how it's being received? And so that occurred to me as I was reading, wondering if the feedback loop includes the recipients on these two reports, and sometimes have, and completely understand the idea you don't want to survey people to death, but I'm not sure what other tool we have that gives us that feedback on how they're receiving the intentional work around these two policies. So that was a thought that occurred to me as I was reading both of them, actually, and wondering, when we do our sort of policy audit this summer, talking and thinking about if there are certain things that we know are data we need to see, it's only fair if we decide that that's a bowl. Shall not fail to, poll people about whatever. I don't know that that's the right answer, but I'm wondering if that's part of the question, Rachel. Or do we have the loop that gives us their voice and how they're receiving the efforts?
Well, it's funny because I had that question on the data. And this is how I utilize this tool, is just to help me framework what I'm thinking. And when I have that question on the data, it's not that I don't trust you, don't believe, but how would we know if somebody didn't understand, or
Right.
That's just the question I have.
Yep.
Well, I think one of the ways you find out is they didn't do the right thing.
Right. And that was the
Yeah.
one question I had, did we have
Yeah,
any
exactly.
cases of, numbers? Did we have any cases of people reporting, I don't know, I'm not going to get the
Yeah.
language right, but I'm sure they can complain and have a grievance process and whatever. And so do we have data around that there, we had no grievances, or we had, I think one of them you indicated that there was no grievance.
Yep, I did.
So
Does that mean in none of them there were any grievances, or is there any other quantitative data that would have supported either of these policies that are numbers that exist? And that might have been what I was asking when I was asking around sort of the bullying policy. I know some of these we have numbers that we report out on, and that would be probably similar with grievances and things like that. For me, it doesn't feel like it needs to hold up the report, but I think it's feedback that the quantitative data wasn't necessarily there, but there's a lot of reference to all of the qualitative work that's happening around this. And then as long as it's being received in the way it's intended and having the desired outcomes in terms of their experience as staff, these are all amazing efforts that seem to me to be right in line with the strategic work we're doing in this district in giving teachers time to work as teams and support ultimately outcomes for kids. And as long as the assumptions are checked that it's having that effect, this is great evidence.
Yeah, well, I mean, so get your thoughts on, I think we should revisit that. I don't know if I'm completely in agreement, but again, your feedback's going to be important. Surveying, we talked about it before, may not achieve what you're trying to achieve. So I think being really clear about what our questions are going to be really important.
Yeah.
And there might be a stock of questions that support this information, and at the risk of them becoming mundane, we ask them every year. I don't know that that's the case. Again, if that were the case and that was what we wanted, in my opinion, from a pure policy standpoint, we need to put that in policy, and not leave it to interpretation necessarily, because it's evidence that we are expecting. And if that is the case as we look at our policies this summer, that's not fair to not, if we need that piece of data to feel like this report
Yeah,
is complete,
yeah.
then I think we need to consider another goal in our policy. So that it's not left to your interpretation
Yeah,
or
yeah.
concern. And we may decide that that wouldn't be necessary as a piece of data, but it sounds like it's a thought to consider, because we're trying to figure out if we've got that feedback loop closed, maybe, is a little bit what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, but you touched on the one question I had as far as pure evidence in tracking grievances.
Mhm.
Are there more? Are there less? I'm assuming we have that data where we say, oh, in 2010 there were 6 grievances, in 2011 there were 12, in 2013 there were only 2. Gosh, we got better.
Is
Do we-
you-
I don't even know if those numbers are even remotely.
Well, I've been here for 4 years and never had a grievance.
Well, there we go.
and
There
it-
we
Well, at
go,
least we're
yeah,
consistent.
so-
It states in here that,
Yeah.
I think it's in writing here, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's an indicator, but what are the other indicators? And,
Right.
Yeah.
and what I'm hearing is that, yeah, we're doing lots of stuff, but, are people buying into it? Is there a commitment to the work? Are they happy about it?
And you may be better equipped to understand how to measure that than we are, because you're doing it, you're seeing it,
Yeah.
And
you
I'm not even
referenced-
necessarily saying are people happy about it. Not that I don't want our staff to be happy. That's not the case. But is everything fair? Like just making sure that we feel it's fair, you feel it's fair, they feel it's fair, and just double checking that.
You mentioned like the use of Google surveys to elicit feedback from staff on a variety of district-led initiatives.
Yeah.
So that could be another data.
Yeah, it's,
point
whenever we do an
for the-
in-service, we always put
Yeah.
the ones in August, January, and March, always send in a
Yeah.
format.
So the data exists somewhere and it informs your next decision on your in-service. So it's referenced, but the data isn't there to get a sense of the feedback that then informs the next decision. So it seems like in some of these cases, some of that's happening.
Mhm.
And wouldn't take up a whole lot more in terms of the report to include data where you have it, especially. And from my standpoint, it doesn't hold this up for tonight, as long as that's the case for the majority. But rather than simply referencing that type of work,
Mhm.
sharing the outcomes of it.
Mhm.
Any other questions or thoughts?
I have a purely typographical feedback, I think, where you have written policy number 2.
Yeah.
I think, at least in one of them that I read, and my iPad's dead tonight, unfortunately, that's why I'm not.
You and David. with the
I know.
bear.
We're just-
I know.
I think you just, it's just, you wrote for no disruptive expression instead of non-disruptive.
Oh, right here?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, right there. That's supposed to be non.
Thank you.
Sorry, getting nitpicky tonight.
No, that's good.
Yeah, the report's great. The only thing I could
You read
find,
the
Right,
report,
'cause-
that's good.
the only thing I could find was a typo.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, hey.
Exactly. So, if we are done with
Okay.
Mark on this, do we have a motion to
I make a
accept the
motion that we accept policy monitoring report 2.2 as presented with the typo correction.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Pass it.
No,
Opposed?
opposed.
Okay.
Okay.
So passes 4-1. David, I'm gonna pass this to you too. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, moving right along, I am going to ask Dan, who so graciously agreed last week to do this report for us, so thank you. And I'm going to let you take it away on 4.2. And I know we've got some typos on this one.
I read this in great detail. I came up with so much detail that I didn't even change the date and author
Yes,
when I went over it. That's kind of funny. 'Cause anyway, whatever. It's just
Talk
sort of
about typos. You were pretty nitpicky.
Yeah, you don't have to be nitpicky to get to grab that one. And, I remember even thinking, wait, well, I'm not sure what we're gonna. Yeah, I didn't even. whatever. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, the
Um,
approved date we can leave, but the author is helpful because next time you're going to get asked again if we don't.
If we don't
I'm
change.
spacing out over here. Did we skip over 2.8?
Oh, I am sorry, Mark. Yes.
Don't be.
We did.
Okay.
Thank you so
I thought
much.
I was missing something completely.
No, I am very sorry. Mark had some information to share with us that regarding plans for next year and with respect to parent involvement. So thank you, Kimberly.
You're welcome.
And Mark, I'm sorry.
Well, no, thanks. I was so wrapped up
was-
in 2.2.
I know.
Over with it.
Me too.
Um,
Apparently.
And I don't have it's 25 after 8 already. Kim and I talked, and rather than put it in the incidental, I thought it was more appropriate talking to Kim to just give you a few minutes of some thinking about next year and about how to more in a more meaningful way engage parents with their kids' education. So next year there will be at each building level a parent advisory council, if you will, that is made up of parents and building administration, and their job will have sort of several pieces to it. One is to make sure that they're aware of what's happening in the schoolhouse in terms of some of the big initiatives like the reparative panel, and then as a council, in partnering with the PTO, making sure there's a conduit so that that information can be effectively distributed across the community, the parent community. Moreover, I think a role might be played in terms of how to reach out to the larger community, using parents as a vehicle to do that. So it's about being aware of what's happening, a communication role that they would be playing. And the other section, which I think is the most exciting to think about, is before we even launch into an initiative, those that take some time to think through, working with the advisory council to get their input to help us inform decisions at the building level. So not a novel idea at all. I was telling Kim that the northwestern provinces in Canada, by provincial law, it's been around since the late 80s, have had parent advisory councils. That's, they have to have in place. So I think there are models out there that we can learn from. It has nothing to do with personnel. It's not about, the placement process, or it might be the process, but it's not about talking about people. It really is some of the big systems issues that we deal with, and it could be some smaller stuff like should we have TVs in the middle school cafeteria. That's a good example of how that quickly went flat line. But it really is an opportunity, more than just symbolically, but to say to parents and guardians that your voice is really important, because you're going to help us make better decisions, and you're going to be able to help us better communicate with other families in the broader community on some of the work that's going on in the schoolhouse. So that will happen. It's the work this summer of the leadership team to come up with what that looks like. I see it as a one-year appointment that a PTO, it wouldn't be working in cross purposes of the PTO, but the PTO might have a rep, the building rep might be on that board or that council. I see it as a one-year appointment, so there's always new ideas that are coming in. But all those sort of details will need to be discussed. I did run it by the PTO board last Monday night. Sorry, I just came out because I had that chance to talk to you guys first.
It's great.
But I think it's something that I think is going to have a really positive effect on parent involvement.
I was excited when Mark shared it with me and wanted to have him have the opportunity to share it with all of you, in that it seemed to have an amazing opportunity to get that parent voice in what's happening in the buildings and provide that feedback to building administration on how the work they're doing is being received by their representation as part of the parent community. So I'm very excited to see how that will shape up. It'll put voice to that piece of it, and maybe increase involvement as we, not just at the end of the budget process, but that would be among the beneficial side effects, that people might have an idea of what are the program things happening in the buildings, and learning as they go along all the systems at play to provide the necessary resources to support the work happening in the buildings.
I also think I mentioned in a 2.1 that I think I need to be involved with the transition from 8th to 9th grade. I think that would be a great thing to be working on with parents in terms of what information are you. So one topical area might be transitions, and how with the help of parents, sort of come up with a more dynamic event for incoming 3rd, incoming 6th, and incoming Ks. So
Yeah,
there's a variety of things we could get into.
Yeah. I was just going to say, so, you know, when you have the council together, so there'll be like topical, will there also be some time for them to bring up some other things of concerns, or is it going to be, is
Yeah.
it how structured versus
I don't know,
non-structured?
Rachel. I mean, I think that's the work ahead is to define what their mission is and the scope of their work. What we don't want to have happen is it come in and just beat on the principal for an hour. I mean, that's not. I know that's not what
Well,
you're suggesting.
No,
but
I'm thinking more, you know, because if you have a council, you probably have people who are working together with the effort of trying to have improvement.
yeah,
So I would think that would be a great avenue for
Yeah.
some of that voice.
yeah. It isn't the
To
principal
come
coming in
in.
and saying, "Sit down. I'm going to give you all of what I got for an hour." I mean, it really is going to be the agenda will be collaboratively set. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that.
And it's not my work. It's I'm going to facilitate it, but I wouldn't be part of that council.
That was one of the things Mark and I discussed too, the opportunity in terms of even the leadership in their own development in sort of thinking strategically about their year and how often they're going to meet with the council and being thoughtful and more forward, you know, not that they wouldn't be forward looking, but they're putting out fires all day, every day, as well as building administrators, to be thoughtful about planning for ideas they may have and creating agendas that allow for feedback on those things in a proactive way is a really great development opportunity for the leadership team as well, in addition to the value they would get out of that in being able to thoroughly vet their thinking on either new ideas or changing, long-standing things. It will give them that trial run on some of that lets them know how they're going to be best effective in communicating and have their answers ready for things. So I was just really excited for so many reasons to hear about this initiative, if you will, initiative things to death here. But I think it'll be well received, and I
think
appreciate
it will
the
be
effort.
too. I can see that as being a niche that isn't really covered in any aspect yet, which a lot of parents I think would be very excited to be involved in.
It might be, an opportunity to identify people who love thinking at a big systems level and now might be interested in board work or appreciate learning and understanding more about the PTO, and it might grow their stable of folks who lead and do so very much and expand that group too. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, well, I'll bring more information as
Thank
we
you.
flesh it out a little bit. It's still in the concept stage.
I like it.
Any other questions
Great.
for Mark on that one
Thank you.
before I again move ahead? All right. Thank you all, and thank you, Mark. And take it away, Dan.
All right. Well, one thing I want you to do in the forms that I passed out, it appears that my family stuck some pages in the printer that weren't supposed to be there. So if you look on the back of yours, if there's anything written on them that would be oddly confusing and inappropriate, let me
I
know.
printed my own, so I'm not even going to run the risk of
Great.
reading anything your family sent me. No.
It's actually specifically for a different class that I teach.
Oh.
It would just be very odd. So, anyway, so now we're fine. I think I've got all the screwed up ones there. A brief bit. My interpretation, I think, is important, is relevant in what it means to be in compliance, in substantial compliance. In my interpretation, insubstantial compliance means we're doing a pretty darn good job. We're just not quite perfect. And so there are places where most of it, I've chosen insubstantial compliance for that reason. That's the way I interpret it. Partial compliance would mean we're doing something wrong, not completely, but we're not doing it well. And I would say substantial compliance, I think we're doing it reasonably well. So I have listed us as being in substantial compliance on part 1, 2, and 3. On part 4, I said we're in compliance because we didn't negotiate any contracts this year. So I was like, hey, that was an easy one. But for part 1, I noted that as far as creating the linkage, it's an ongoing thing that we talk about a lot, and then we tend to do about half of to 3/4 of what we all really want to do, just for our own time constraints. But there were a lot of opportunities where, I noted particularly Kim and Mark being really involved in the education components of Heart and Soul. The fact that I believe all the 5 members of it at the time went to the Heart and Soul culmination, as well as except Dave, did you not go to that?
Dave did not.
The last Heart and Soul, okay. And the Calendar 2.0 presentation, I believe I think we were all at that one, weren't you? Were you there at that one? You were there,
Yes.
because we had a meeting right after it.
Yeah.
And so we are reaching out. We also via Facebook, Front Porch Forum, all of our usuals. But I did note that it seemed like there were a couple of times this year where there was communication from community parents to us, that there seemed to be some confusion on us, including Mark, getting back to them. Say, wait, should Mark get back to them? Should we get back to them? Should the principal get back to them? So I feel like it'd be nice if there were some greater clarification, and this may be a conversation between us and you. Exactly when is it appropriate for us? If one of us as an individual gets information, how does that feedback need to happen? Does it need to come to the board, and then something from the board goes out? Can we as an individual reply because we were the one who was contacted? And so that's just, I feel like there's not a lot of clarity there. And so there were a couple times where it felt like, hey, no response actually really went out in a timely manner because we were all not sure where it was going to come from. So I don't have a specific question or issue, but that seemed to be a place where we may have tripped a little bit.
Do we think that is resolved through clarity in process, so that we really know how that's going to be handled? And
Yeah, I think, and maybe, I don't know if that's a discussion tonight or a discussion, 20 minutes to the retreat, to really clarify, hey, if we get communication to us, how do we respond? How do we, the individual, versus the board? When is it appropriate to, maybe sorry, I'm already getting into the discussion, but it seems like that should be something that would be worth talking about, because I do feel like we tripped up a little on that one.
One of the simplest things to do is a reply that says, will refer this to the superintendent.
Or to the board, depending on.
There are a number of different responses that could be appropriate
Yeah.
depending on what the situation is. But being policy governance, perhaps the most common, best would be, I'll turn it over to superintendent.
I think
But the
we have-
superintendent could dish it back to us too.
Yeah.
And I think the piece that I know has sometimes left question is if it was done, if the loop was closed, like whether
Yeah.
or not the issue is resolved in the way the person wanted, the process has been completed.
Right.
And that's something that would sort of beg for some clarification on, okay, if it comes to us and it's an admin-related thing, we're going to send it off, and then Mark's just going to fall back with us when it's closed.
Right.
So, and when is it the chair has to respond, or, so I would agree that this would warrant a conversation so we can really establish clarity and process on that, so that every single one of us is handling it the same way. And in some instances, we may get stuff that Mark doesn't, which I think happened recently on an inquiry that came to us, which he actually hadn't been copied. I assumed he might have been, but he hadn't. So he might not have even been aware, and we might have been thinking, definitely an admin thing, it's being taken care of. So I think it's incumbent on us, too, to not necessarily check our assumptions that the inquiry ended up where it should have.
Yeah.
So copying in all the appropriate people so that everybody's in the know, and then really being able to leave it to the folks that should be responding, but doing so confidently, knowing that we're gonna, get the closure on it on our end, so that we can know that we're out of it and we want to stay out of it.
Yeah.
But making sure that we have at least responded to let them know that we've heard
Yep.
you, we're aware.
Yep.
And does that only come from the board chair? Does it come from individual?
And it probably may depend where it's directed, but on the thing I had been copied on, I was copied and it wasn't sent to me. And then I saw the responses happen and I thought, okay, it wasn't actually sent to me, as opposed to something directed to the board, as opposed to the board being sort of infoed in on it.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be beneficial for us to, whether a tabletop exercise on it or really set up, let's write out our process on this
Yeah.
and make sure everybody understands it, and make sure it makes sense in terms of efficiency for all of us and for Mark and his folks. So we have clear expectations around it. I could see clarity and process and that making sense.
Cool. The other piece that I just mentioned more is something we've talked about a little bit I thought I'd throw it in here because I think it is relevant to this and connecting with the public. Finding a way to make some of our meetings better advertised as presentations to the public. Some of them are completely not. Some of them are great presentations to the public, and making a little greater distinction there and publicizing some of those. And I know we've all kind of tossed those ideas around a little bit, but again, I think we've already talked about throwing that one on the agenda for the summer meeting as well. In 4.22, I believe I'm correct in saying this, that we did not make any policy changes this year. We made a slew of little ones the year before, and then we kind of took a vacation from that this year. But have said we need to make sure that our policies are in line. So in hindsight, maybe I should have written in compliance on that one because, we're just kind of staying the course there. But I know we want to look at some of the policies and make sure that they're still relevant, as we should do every couple of years. 4.2.3, I actually left verbatim the same as Kim's language from last year. Thank you very much. Except for the second paragraph, I noted I felt really valuable feedback, Mark, that you gave us last meeting in our executive session. In really understanding what is it, how do we interpret your performance? What are the guidelines there? And making that really clear. So I think your feedback was spot on, and making sure that you really know exactly, hey Mark, we want you to do this, and then we make sure we evaluate you accordingly. So I felt like that was relevant there. And then I say on the last one, we didn't have any contracts this year, so to negotiate.
You will next year.
I should have. Woohoo!
You
Friendly
did a brush
amendment,
up on that,
Yes.
right?
Page 1, May 12, 2014.
Yeah.
Dan House.
Yeah. We have. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other typos, Mark?
Otherwise, we're asking.
Since I got you on
Well,
one.
you have May 14, right, 2014?
Yeah.
Today's May 12th.
Well,
Yeah,
What
but
section was that in?
just says
2014. Yeah.
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I
At
got
the
it.
very top where it says date and
Oh,
the author.
The whole.
Oh, at the top of
Yeah,
that.
the whole
Yeah.
heading is wrong.
Copy and paste.
Yep.
So do we put an action item in about the discussion of process?
We could do that. You mean add it as a friendly amendment?
Officially put in
or-
a.
Well,
put an
I'm just
amendment at
wondering,
the
would
end.
that be good for us to do as a friendly amendment, put in the action item to discuss the process or development of a process?
Yes,
Of-
I mean, are people open to that idea?
Should be a process.
Yeah.
Yeah, do
Really
we want it to be
help
part?
adding
Do
it
we,
to
do we
this
want it to be
report.
part of this monitoring document that says our action item is going to be at the summer retreat, discuss the process of
I think so,
response
because then
to
when we
public
come back to
inquiry.
this next year,
Mhm.
and we look at what our action item was supposed to have been.
And we didn't
and
do
if
it?
we
No,
don't
do
do
it.
we will make sure it gets done. So
Okay.
I think
All right.
that would be
Okay, so action item, discuss process of,
process. What I wrote in my notes to remind myself to put that in the agenda was clarify process on responses to inquiries sent to the board / administration and process for closing the
can I
loop.
just have that?
Yeah.
It was very well worded.
Clarify process on responses to inquiries sent to the board / administration
Let's read it off your computer later.
and closing the loop. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really well
And
articulated.
closing the loop wasn't especially articulate, but and agree upon that process at the summer retreat.
Yeah, don't shut down your computer till after
I
I write
won't.
that down.
Okay.
Cool. All right.
Um,
Anything else? I welcome comments.
Well done.
Thank you.
Okay. Then I will entertain a motion to accept the monitoring report.
Motion to approve as presented with the friendly amendments.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Passes 5-0. Opposed.
I
I heard that time I actually heard all 5 of us, so I didn't
We're good.
bother with the opposed, but and okay, on to
I did.
did I pass around my I didn't. So 4.5 was mine. I could hardly ask Dan to do something at the last minute that I was not willing to take on myself.
I think I'm missing something.
So, because printing double-sided, you're going to need to flip
Oh.
up. Yes.
Oh dear.
That works.
Sorry,
That works.
I
folks.
like it. I like it. That's-
Yeah, I decided I'd go printing double-sided since there are so many pages here. So Brendan had done this last year, and this policy addresses board member code of conduct. And again, I would agree we were largely insubstantial or compliance in these areas. The first, I had us in substantial compliance. Kimberly, is it? I wonder, do we have this?
Yeah, I
Is
think
this one up?
I think it cleared up there, yeah.
Is it one of
Oh,
the,
sweet.
These are your two,
Yeah, I think it was at the bottom, on the bottom nav bar.
down here.
Yeah. There it is.
There we go.
There it is.
Thank you.
Couldn't
So
read behind your head.
members must demonstrate loyalty to the ownership, unconflicted by loyalties to staff, organizations, or personal interests as parents and guardians. And here, I wanted to note that this is definitely among the most challenging parts of our job. I think this is the same category we fell in last year in terms of substantial compliance. It's hard to imagine we're ever going to find a time that we're wholly compliant in that we wear so many hats in our roles in this community, as parents, as board members, as taxpayers. And our challenge is going to be to be able to be both engaged individuals as well as engaged board members and be very clear about the hats we're wearing at those different times. There have been instances in the past year when any number of us have struggled, and I think it, like I said, will remain our challenge. So it's more a friendly reminder that this is always in our minds, that we are never just simply a parent or grandparent, that we're wearing a couple hats. And we want to do our best to be as clear on which hat we're wearing at which time, so that people can receive us and respect boundaries. I felt that we are not doing any self-dealing or taking jobs by our connections through the school board. I felt we were fully in compliance on number 2. And on number 3, I broke that down under A, B, and C. I felt under A, again, being by nature of our relationships in the community, as parents and board members and spouses and being in the grocery store and other places, we want to do our best to really be acting simply as ourselves and not representing that in hearing people's concerns, we're taking them on as ours to solve as board members. Because we are always going to get into conversations as parents in a parking lot or elsewhere. And it remains, one of our biggest challenges. And whatever the words are that we say, how they're received is equally as important. So it's just part of our work. 4.3.c. There are occasions where we've come to the table as board members with information that we have as individuals, and that has, on occasion, influenced our behavior at the board table, and that is another area we need to remain vigilant, that our hats when we're sitting here are crystal clear, that we are board members operating at a policy level, and that we may come to this board with knowledge and experiences that are part of the many other hats we wear, but we need to hold ourselves accountable to the highest level of professional decorum at this table around our role as policy leaders. And that's where I felt we were in substantial compliance. On 4, I had us fully compliant. I think we do a fine job with confidentiality and issues of sensitive nature. Members being properly prepared for board deliberations. I think we all have always the best intentions to be fully prepared, having read everything and coming with our questions. And we all have very busy lives, and in deference to all those hats we wear. But we need to really try again here, hold ourselves to the highest standard of coming prepared to this meeting as we would for anything else we might do in our lives, and being ready to be fully engaged. And I think most of the time, all of us do it, and at any given time, myself included, we can think, oh my gosh, I really didn't get to read that as thoroughly as I would have wanted to. I didn't make my notes in the margin. It wasn't, and here I just think we can even do a little peer check-in with that, and that might be a nice, outcome of having one person sort of be in charge of how'd the meeting go, so that we don't have any one person dominating the conversation, myself included, and having others catching up on the reading. And I think it'll be a more rich conversation to the extent, and it always is when we're all here ready to ask thoughtful questions of Mark or each other. So, and I think this is truly more the exception than the rule, but I think we can do our own self-checks on that, and we can do a little peer support on that, I think, as we look at meeting evaluations going forward and how we do that. Any questions? I did have suggested action at the end.
I have a lot of problems with this report.
Yeah. Questions for me, David?
I'm going to start off by saying that when I was running initially for the school board, someone told me, get used to the fact that the administration wants you around to say yes to their proposals.
Mm.
Perhaps truer statement could not be made. I think that the way that this policy has been interpreted, what it really says is we can't talk to anybody. We can't have kids in school.
Mm.
We can't go to school, et cetera, et cetera. I'd be better off living in Brattleboro and commuting up here to go to a school board meeting to hear what is going on. And in part, if we do hear something, you aren't supposed to say anything about it.
That certainly wasn't what I meant for the interpretation to be. I don't think that's what I said, but if it was received in
But
that
there
way.
are times that if we see problems,
everybody-
we're not supposed to say anything, and if we do, nothing ever happens as a result of it.
I'm just making notes for myself here, David, but I'm trying to follow that line of thinking. Does anybody else have any thoughts or
Can you
questions
give an
around that? I'm
example of
trying
what
to.
you're-
I think
follow.
I can see, I can clearly see both sides in that it's a matter of, I think for all of us, an interpretation of, I mean, what makes us, one of the things that makes us good board members is that we don't live in Brattleboro. We do actually see what goes on. We do have experience in the schools. At whatever level, as a grandparent, as a parent of the little one, or you're almost out of here, you know, whatever.
Thanks for the reminder. I'm only a little sensitive to that with a senior now. So.
I think it's that varied experience, but that experience that does make us good board members. But then when we do come to the table, we have to say, okay, I'm a member of this group. I'm a parent of a Founders Band member. But that shouldn't change how I feel about our budget, whether or not we're putting enough towards our extracurriculars, including our band. We can say, hey, our band is awesome, or geez, our band has really fallen down this year, and I have experience with that because of my experience in the school. But then to be able to take an objective look and say, is band something we should have? I think most of us say yeah, but not let my experience with Mr. Value and Mr. Stone affect whether or not I think we should have band.
That's what I
As an
intended.
example, so,
That's how I intended my interpretation to be read, David, but I want to make, did you understand that from the way I wrote it? That we wear multiple hats and we have to be clear about the hats we're wearing when we're wearing them?
yeah, that's how I
with the groups
interpret
as
it,
they receive.
and that's how I interpret it. Reading what you wrote certainly doesn't fly in the face of how I interpret it. I think, yeah, they're sort of speaking the same language.
I don't want to put anybody else on the spot, but just so that I can be sure, because David, that wasn't my intention in terms of my interpretation. So if the majority of the board felt that that was the interpretation I made in having written it in this way.
I'm looking at it probably from a different perspective than others, but still, it is an emotion that I have, and I feel that I should be entitled to express it,
Oh, definitely.
which I have.
No, definitely. I just wanted to make sure that because this becomes our sort of monitoring of ourselves on our code of conduct, if I want to make sure you guys are comfortable with the interpretation of what the policy is asking, and then, what I'm suggesting are places where it's just our challenge, and it's a reminder that that is what makes us strong board members. Is just exactly as you described, Dan, I think, is the experience we bring to the table, but then also the opportunity to be, your word was perfect, objective in thinking at a policy level of not just your personal experience, but that certainly informs, all the information we come to this table with. But we just have to hold ourselves to the job at hand when we're sitting here. That's what I meant for this to say, but I want to make sure that that's how you guys understand it as well. Again, I'm checking my assumptions here, because for David, it didn't read that way.
Maybe even adding the word objective to these notes would be a helpful descriptive,
Yeah.
piece to the interpretation.
I will agree with a lot of the wording that, shall we say, with walking a tightrope. Sometimes you fall to left, sometimes you fall to right, sometimes you make it all the way across. But
And
Yeah, I agree that it's an area that we will always struggle with. We kind of automatically have to, unless we do.
But specifically, which is statement of fact, I'm married to an employee of the school district, so I'm not supposed to listen to anything that I hear. But by the same token, you people are all parents. You're in the school. You have a different source of information than I do. Is either one of them accurate? I don't know, I don't care. I'm just saying that it is a different source of information. The small circle of friends that I have, some from the junction, some from the town, some from Jericho Underhill, everybody has their questions. For example, previously, from the tech center, lunchtime, if you don't believe me, come down tomorrow, we're gonna be discussing it. How do you determine who's eligible for free and reduced lunch? That question came up 6 months ago. And I didn't have an answer.
Yeah. I think there are also two sides to this. One is what we say when we're talking, and make it clear that what I'm about to say is from Dan House, the individual, not the school board, unless by some wild chance we've been given that authority, which we don't hand out that authority very often. And the flip side of that is what we bring in here and say in the board setting. I think that goes both ways. Because I think
But if I hear similar comments from 2 or 3 different sources, admittedly from different school districts about ours, does that carry weight or does it? It depends on the subject.
I think that's a great opportunity for the next time Mark comes up with a monitoring report and says, we're all hunky-dory on this. And you say, well, I've had some feedback. Mark, tell me about whatever.
Well,
What are we doing?
Or is that a way to then encourage them to take their own route? So depending where your sources are. Because I can think of situations where I've been in conversations and topics will come up.
Oh,
and
you're
I'd be
a
like,
PTO, aren't you? That's another,
well,
that's
that
another source
was-
of information.
but asking them, okay, can you just say what you just told me and write it to the principal or the teacher or the this or the that. So it's an opportunity for us, but it's hard. This by far is the hardest thing for me to do, is to try and separate. And I'll have my husband tell me, are you speaking as a board member or as a parent? I'm a parent. Unless I am at a board meeting, I'm a parent. And that's conversations even with just him. My husband is like that. I love him to pieces. But it's hard.
Well, maybe
Because we all hear stuff from a variety of different
Yeah.
sources.
And I think in that situation, David, I could think of an example where we were just talking about it in the last monitoring report. We may be hearing it from all these different sources, and Mark may have never heard it. So his opportunity to be responsive as opposed to reactive, if he were bringing us a monitoring report and said, oh, wait, 2 months ago we heard these 3 different things that really contradict that, isn't fair to Mark's situation
Right,
to
of course.
not be able to be responsive. So again, I could see us incorporating that as we're talking about process for when we're hearing from the community, whether it's an official email to us or hijacking us in the grocery store or sitting on the sidelines, that we might be noticing themes that I don't think we need to inundate Mark with every last thing we're hearing. If we're hearing things more than once, probably Mark would like to at least hear it once. Am I right, Mark?
Sure. And I'm not making this up. I don't hear from you guys, and I don't hear from parents. So I mean, whatever you hear, I'm not hearing it.
I think
And,
we want to
so
encourage
I think the
people
question
to
is
take the path.
that you or David said it. That have you talked to the superintendent, and will you allow me to let the superintendent know on your behalf? And if so, I'll do that, and I'm going to follow up with the superintendent to make sure he did his job following up with you. That's the second part of that question. And I'm going to hold the superintendent accountable for closing the loop. So it's, do I have permission from you to share with the superintendent or you, and I'm going to follow up with Mark? That doesn't happen, guys.
Right.
I don't get those. I mean, we get the errant email once in a while, and most of the time it's confidential stuff about kids. And so, like, there's only so much you should know about that. So, but I think I would just encourage you to, I do pay attention when the phone call comes in.
So
And
maybe
I
that's
think-
part of the process that we're going to talk about this summer. Is
I
it's
agree.
not just communication that we get in letter or other form, but in whatever form. How do
verbal.
we bridge that?
And we may have more information in receiving commentary from fellow parents, even in terms of context, to know, wow, that's something Mark would really want to know about, or, boy, I can sense how frustrated that parent is. I think it's pretty isolated to their situation. I'll encourage them to go through their paths, or, my gosh, we keep hearing that same thing over and over again as I sit here on the sidelines. If somebody else isn't going to take this, I need to pass this information along. It's a real
It's really hard
problem that's
because
going to reflect badly on, it's bad as a parent to be experiencing it, and it will ultimately reflect badly on people who may not have known, who might have been in a position to do something about it, who may not have even known it existed.
David, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think, you've expressed more than once that this governance structure is a challenge, because you are an incredible guy who has served over 2 decades of great service here, and so this is a different animal that you're riding right now. And but I think the question has to be asked: where does it say in policy that it's your policy? So, like it or not, it's your policy, and I think the interpretation is accurate because it is the policy that it is, but it's different than past practice in terms of how the boards have operated. But I think you have to ask the question: where does it say in policy that you have a role?
I'd like
And
to tell a little bit
in a
of a
discussion
story
that we
here.
have is the mean stuff is the stuff that gets our attention, but the focus should be on ends. But when you do hear a pattern, then of things that are happening in the means category, I do need to hear about that. Again, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but I think that I've heard that from you before. I get that,
I've been involved twice with one location, I'll put it that way. The first time, when the maintenance wasn't so good, I spoke to an individual, didn't get too much of a response, basically got laughed at, went right over their head, I don't know how many levels. You know something, it got taken care of. The next time I made a suggestion to that individual, I got laughed at again. Guess what I did? I went to the state, and guess what happened? My concern was addressed. I don't like doing that, but if I see something that I think is grossly wrong, sooner or later, I'm not afraid to do it.
Well, I just hope you give. I think that's probably something that's happened. Hopefully not when I was here, but 'cause
It
I-
didn't happen within the school district.
Yeah, well,
period.
I guess I would just want the courtesy call that if there's something that's grossly, negligent based on policy, then I think the board has a responsibility to call that to my attention. I hope I'm not obtuse and I do see things that are happening. But if there's something you're walking down the sidewalk every day going, I got to talk to Andrews. I'm going to do before you make the call to the state. Not that I'm afraid of the state because they can be very helpful. Here for the state, here to help.
I told the person-
But that we talk about that because I think
Right.
I would. If you're concerned about it, believe me, I'm going to be concerned.
I told the
about
person beforehand, I said, I'm tempted to call the state on this.
Yeah.
And they laughed at me.
Well, that's not
Guess
very,
who laughed
that's not very
last?
respectful.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad that wasn't here, and I think I know Cashel and I had discussed it. We don't have to cede our responsibility as engaged parents, engaged grandparents, spouses. We get to have our conversations with our teachers, and we're sometimes, consequently, being engaged parents, going to also be stopped in the hall to talk about something else, and we want to be able to listen and be responsive, but direct people where they would most appropriately get their concerns addressed, and in some ways sort of duly note if we were to start to hear patterns of that same thing happening elsewhere. We definitely want to give Mark the heads up, and it is part of what informs us as parents and as board members. But when we're here, the job we have to do is use that information and experience in the context of operating around the policies that we have in place to assure accountability to those policies and transparency around those policies. And I think the part that came up as an action item under Dan's will give us a more obvious and clear sense of our responsibility when we hear those things, and the best process for making sure that Mark's getting feedback that he should be getting when he can do something about it, not when it's too late to do something about it.
Because that is the hard part when you've requested to other parents, because that is where I feel like, okay, if it's me making that sort of call versus, hey, I can get so-and-so's parent, they were there too, they were discussing it, encourage them to make the report, keep me out of that loop, but then I never know, did they, didn't they? Did anybody ever make the call? And I can think of 2 situations in the last week where I don't know if you'll ever hear, or if
Well, now
a
you will,
principal
because you
ever
guys will
hears.
chat about it later. No,
But I
Yeah.
always wonder, as a board member, I'm trying to encourage others to do that versus myself, because I also don't want. So this is again where it comes to code of conduct, where it's really, I feel like it's a very sticky area, because it's like, oh, she's a board member, she's going to keep riling
If
us.
we
And
mention
that's
it in
not
front of
what I
her, she'll
mean
take care of
to.
it, right?
Exactly, and I don't want that to be the situation either. I want to advocate for people taking that on to themselves and not being afraid to just say, hey, we noticed this. Not sure
Empower
if this is the way it
people
should be
to
going.
be-
Feedback
but
is
it's
really,
very
really
hard.
important, and for far too long we've been insulated from, sort of the feedback that parents would like to give us, or the community would like to give us, or a colleague would like to give us. And the new system that relates to leadership and teacher growth, feedback is really important. And the concept is, not only is it about, are you a good teacher as defined by the act of teaching, but it's triangulated with other sets of data, like your professional responsibilities. How do you behave in your job as a teacher or a principal or a superintendent? And those data need to be factored into the overall evaluation of, are we doing our jobs? And so, like it or not, feedback, it's here to stay, and it should be. It's just, how do we use it responsibly so that we can grow and learn from it and not feel like we're reacting? Because my guess is, if board members, you're hearing stuff you're cringing, I would probably be cringing too. So we need to hear about that. We're a human enterprise. There's 250 people that work here with 1,350 kids. I mean, it's a lot of action going on. So we need to get ongoing feedback in a timely way to deal with it and get better. But I get concerned because I know there's a lot being talked about, and I don't. Again, I'm not obtuse, but if it doesn't come my way, it's hard for me to address it. And then
you
I'm
can't
going
be
to address
everywhere.
things that, you probably thought I should have addressed it differently. And that's another struggle that you're going to have. I know that.
Yeah, I think there are 2 very different issues. One is, was the loop completed just the way we want it? Well, maybe not.
Yeah.
Was the loop completed? That's important.
That is
Yes,
important. That's the
that's
number
You know,
one thing.
or whoever, you're never going to, as we say, you're never going to please everybody. But as long as you came to the end of
We
the circle,
listened. We closed the loop.
as long as you close the loop and annoying people.
That's right.
Sorry.
I know.
Are there any other questions or thoughts or concerns or amendments we think we're looking for? I haven't changed anything right now. I had a suggested action. We could role play to work through potential conflicts of interest areas, which we might be able to do at our work session this summer. Or it might be, can we bring this to the table? How have others handled this? What's worked for you? Because we are uber-informed parents now as policy gurus. And we are uber-informed board members as engaged parents. So, we may be wearing any individual hat, but we definitely have more information than maybe the person sitting next to us on how things should go. And we might learn from each other on how we can address similar issues going forward. So that was one thought I had around suggested action. And this could not have been more perfect that I should suggest that we have a process for timeline for submitting monitoring reports when I submitted this to you guys last night. So I'm going to give us some excuse here, Dan, because we agreed to take this on in the middle of last week when Mark and I were planning for this meeting. But I think that we should set ourselves a standard on that. Mark gets all of his stuff done for the most part, except for budget season, the Wednesday before, so we get packets on Thursday, and we have ample time to prepare. So here I am suggesting that we all come as prepared as we possibly can, and we're getting stuff on Monday nights. And so I'm absolutely as guilty as the next person of having done this, more than once. And I will apologize for it every single time, but I think that ideally when we come to some agreement this summer, we should really do our very best to make that crunch time on Tuesday night versus Sunday night for each of us to knock out our reports and give people time to read and think and absorb and be ready to ask us questions when they come.
I agree.
I
think it'd be
agree,
good.
absolutely.
Hey, at least yours said 2014 on it.
Yes, it did. Any other questions, comments, or concerns on this? David?
I'm only gonna say, I don't know how I wanna vote on this. You understand what my emotions are, but I
I
can't necessarily say
do.
that I disagree with some of the wording involved.
And I think we all share those emotions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do. This is the hardest part of our jobs. Holding ourselves to the higher standards makes it all that much more challenging. It's just always going to be the case, and it's always what, as Dan said, makes the conversations at this table rich. Is all the experiences we come with. That the conversations at this table though will be effective and efficient in leading the district if we are very clear about our roles and responsibilities when we're sitting at this table. And I think that's our job when we're here.
Can I make a motion to accept the monitoring report as presented?
Thank you, Dan.
Second that.
Thank you, Cashel.
Sometimes it is.
Any further discussion? Because I've forgotten to ask that earlier in all these things. No, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those
I think I'm
opposed?
gonna vote no on this,
Okay.
but don't ask me to explain it.
Okay. Well, and I didn't give you a little report to fill out, so you're just in a no kind of mood tonight. All those opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed. Passes 4-1. Thank you all. And so again, we will do better when we do our own little rubric to fill out the evaluations like Mark did for us. So we have so much good work to happen around process this summer. I am excited about it, guys. Retreat date for August, speaking of this summer, did people have an opportunity to look at their calendars for the week of August, I want to say 11th? Or the following week?
Nothing. I wish I had your
I
calendar.
would vote for the following week.
The 18th? We can,
I'm
Can
trying
we
to
do-
remember when. I actually think I will. What is
our
the 11th?
first
What
full
day is
board
the 11th?
meeting. The 11th is a Monday. I'm not suggesting Monday. I was suggesting we look at the week of the 11th and the week of the 18th. Our first regular board meeting will be Monday, the 25th. And school starts the 27th. Right, Mark?
Mhm.
Yes. So I'm certainly, I can't do it earlier than the week of the 11th. I think there's nothing that's necessarily, I guess from maybe Mark and I planning our agenda for the 25th, if we could do it early in the week of the 18th, if we don't do it the week of the 11th.
Are we in July or August?
We're in August.
Okay.
So Mark and I have been tending to meet in the, by Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest regarding the agenda for the upcoming meeting, so that the packets are going out by Thursday, right, Mark? I mean, you and I have really
Yep.
been meeting Monday or
Yep.
Tuesday, but I think in case our retreat were to bring something in terms of process or agenda that we wanted to change for the 25th, if we could do it somewhere maybe late in the week of the 11th or early in the week of the 18th would be my preference.
And I'm just, if we could keep it off Tuesday, because that is the one day I work every week at the
Yeah.
hospital, and I would appreciate not having to give that day up.
Yeah, I am.
That would be
I
for
would
me.
prefer not to do the 11th. We have an advisory council meeting for
Oh,
friendships
that's right.
on the
That's
11th.
right. Yes.
So the 11th would really probably be out for me. It looks like Tuesday the 12th wouldn't be ideal for Rachel. So if we were to go 13th, 14th, maybe Friday in the summer is anybody's favorite day, I don't know. But really 13th, 14th, 15th, 18th, 19th, do any of those days work collectively for all of us?
I don't think I have any conflicts with those after
I don't have
after the
any.
11th.
I'd prefer not a Friday
Yeah, me
personally,
too.
but
Me too.
So maybe the 13th.
David, are you good? All right, David's on board for whichever. So, Mark, would you mind checking the 13th or 14th?
Okay. Meeting,
Meeting-
for a locale, you mean?
Yeah, I was expecting you would jump in and tell us where your conflicts are. So I apologize, I didn't ask specifically. We don't want to schedule if you're not available.
No, so what day did you, what day were you
So we were
thinking?
thinking 13th, 14th, or potentially 18th, 19th.
Okay.
Potentially.
13, 14, or 18, 19?
Not the 19th, I'm sorry, not the 19th.
if you
13th,
can, if you
14th,
can.
or the 18th.
That would be great.
Or the 18th, which is a Monday.
Monday.
Right?
So Wednesday, Thursday, or Monday. Are those all okay for you right now?
13th, 14th, I need to double check another calendar. It might be retreating with the leadership team, but
Okay.
I'll see.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want just one day?
Yeah, well.
You don't want to do a
We,
week
we'd
together?
love to meet for 2 or 3 weeks.
No, we are good.
One day's good.
One day, okay, I just check.
No, one day, and actually, we should probably talk about how long people are willing to meet.
I'm gonna take the day off from work, so.
I would say like
8 to 8?
2,
No, I'm
8 to
kidding.
2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
8 to 2
Yeah.
ish, like 6 hours
Have
are
lunch.
workable.
Yeah.
Yeah, working lunch.
A working lunch,
Yeah.
6 hours maybe. Or
Okay.
9 to 3, or something
Yeah.
like that to
All right.
include.
Did the
a-
room at St. Mike's
9
work
to
for you
3.
guys last year?
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah,
And we
that's
had
great.
lunch, the cafeteria was right below, and there was
Yeah.
catered.
They
and
brought us up, yeah,
That's-
sandwiches.
yeah, that worked
that
beautiful.
worked
Parking
great.
was fine.
Yeah.
As long as it's air conditioned.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it was.
is.
Can we
Yeah,
put
it's in-
It's in
um,
They have some
Aola.
new spaces too in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a student
we
union.
do,
yeah.
that student
Yeah.
center's nice.
Beautiful.
All right, so I'll
Um,
confirm tomorrow.
Would we have the opportunity to have something like this?
Mhm.
Yeah, I couldn't remember
Yep.
if we did.
Yep.
So that, as long as we have that, that would be great.
Okay.
So I'm thinking maybe 9 to 3 or 8:30 to 2:30, something like that.
Okay.
Thank
I'll
you, guys.
confirm with you tomorrow.
That'd be great. Okay, thank you. So we were gonna take a couple minutes, since we're way over, to evaluate our meeting, and I am really sorry, guys. We are way over. I apologize. I appreciate the rich conversation, and I apologize for the not very well managed time. So, we may have beaten code of conduct to death in that report. I'm just not sure. How did we do around process, do you think, in this meeting?
I think we did fine, and I think in general, I don't like the idea of, yes, I like the idea of getting out if you're on time, but I don't like the idea of cutting conversations
Makes
short.
sense.
Mhm.
I've always felt like when we have run to 9:30 or whatever, it's been a tiring good thing.
Yeah.
I don't like feeling like we have to cut off discussion. And tonight, there was no input from the crowd, but when there is input from the crowd, I feel like that's a time when, hey, so we run 15 minutes late because we have some good input from whether they be folks you bring in or true public.
Yeah.
So-
Thank you. Okay. Any other thoughts?
I don't have much of a reference
What'd
point,
you
but
think of how we did?
it seemed to run appropriately, and yeah, I agree. You don't want to cut short any conversation that's productive and meaningful.
You're not thinking, oh God, what have I done?
I
We'll see
would-
how the retreat goes.
I know. Well, I would think, Heschel, I'll just invite that if we get ourselves stuck in those weeds, we should check each other on that. Not, I think certainly my job to try and make sure that we don't, not to cut off conversation one way or another, but more, are we having the right conversation? And so I'm trying to do that, but I absolutely welcome that if we are catching each other. There are 5 of us. We, I think, trust and respect one another enough to be able to catch ourselves, and I would invite that feedback as it's happening, as opposed to us waiting till the end of the meeting. So I'll encourage you to, us to catch each other if we're getting there. And I will, that is always sort of what I am doing. So that's partially why I didn't notice we went so far over. I felt as though we were engaged in meaningful conversation around improving our work. And so I didn't have to notice that we were over. But I would also probably do my best to rein it in if I were finding that we were getting ourselves stuck in places that wasn't productive around, continuous improvement of the work we're supposed to be doing. So, any other thoughts on how we did? What do you think, Sir David? It's okay that we disagreed. How'd we do on our meeting getting through it? What do you think? Did you feel as though you were safe to express your opinions?
There are times that I feel that what we're doing is sitting around watching paint dry.
Here's that boring thing again.
My gosh, folks.
That's an expression that Mr. 80-year-old uses periodically.
Well, I think our time is well spent, even when it may seem that, it is our job to hold people accountable to, taking care of the policies that we're setting out there. So, and it isn't the most exciting stuff always, but I think nonetheless really important. So thank you, though. You're right, David. We got to mix it up with some of the more exciting stuff, which we're doing
Next
at the
time.
June
Next week.
9th meeting.
Yeah.
And Mark, the one thing I would say is the roundtable you're doing for the coming Monday. Will you guys do like an alert now or something that reminds people that that's coming up? Because that sounds awesome, and I would hate for that to all be pulled together and have there not be good attendance. Will
It's
the
gone
PTO
out
do a
several
blast?
times, and I do hear what we use the alert now too many times. So I was thinking about treatment of parents
Good
and
one,
guardians.
though.
You can't. I get it.
can't.
Will-
I got it
I
everywhere.
know.
Is it? It's probably in the PTO calendar. I
Yeah,
think
no,
that's,
it's been
I think that's
advertised
actually where I
several
saw
times.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
But now we plan on sending it out
Yeah.
again.
Or teachers putting it on their things, or whatever parents most often look at. And I'm a parent of a middle schooler now, so I don't know. We don't get a whole lot in paper, but I do my best to try and check in. So Kevin can blog about it or whatever.
So we have a picture-taking opportunity
Oh, yes,
once
we
you
do.
go for
Okay,
adjournment.
so we can,
Oh.
I will entertain, if we're good on this discussion around our code of conduct tonight, I appreciate all of your input, folks. Thank you, Cashel, for joining us and getting sworn in and all of it. It's fun to have you full on at the table.
Thank you.
And I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Have a picture
No
taken.
discussion. All those in favor?
Aye. Don't shut your computer
Opposed?
down.
And 5-0.